Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest Brain or Shine webinar. So yes, I'm Mark and this is Jules.
Just in case you didn't work that out.
Yeah. We have Tim as well. Welcome along, Tim.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us, Tim.
That's okay.
Yeah, today we are talking about taking those hidden disabilities back to work and the struggles that people find following a brain injury. Yeah, the difficulties of returning to work if you have to following a brain injury. And I can see we've got lots of wonderful people joining us. Claire, I know you've had a difficult period in terms of returning to work and eventually decided it's not for you. Hello to Teresa from Wisconsin. I hope I've said that right. And
Wisconsin,
you're
yeah.
about to return to work. Eva's working 7 hours a week now.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. And Rebecca is looking forward to getting some tips on getting back to work.
Fantastic.
That's wonderful. And I'm sorry if I've missed anybody out, but yeah, welcome everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just going to sort of chat about the going back to work situation and how we can give you some ideas and some tips and some help if that's something that you've got to do.
Yeah. So yeah, do keep putting stuff in the chat, and if we see something on there and we're mid-flow through something, we might come back to it. So don't think we've missed you out. We will keep revisiting the chat as well. Any questions, any tips or anything you can share with us? We learn as much from you as you may do from us and Tim. So that's always really, really good. And these webinars are also recorded, so people will pick these up later on. So if you're watching this back later on, the chat doesn't work, but you can get in touch with us through Brain or Shine, and we'll tell you how to do that at the end. So we've just got a couple more just to catch on. Claire's followed up there and said she'd love to know how to go back to work. So we'll hopefully help with that. And Naomi's also said that she's working, it's very challenging, and she's hoping to get some tips. But yeah, what we do want to start with really is the early days of our brain injury, and perhaps for Tim as well. I mean, just to share with you, I was working as a freelance presenter at the time of my brain injury, and the understatement is probably that nothing prepared me for what was coming next. But I guess I just tried to get on with it. One of the biggest challenges I had was I was self-employed, so there was no sort of sick pay. There was no sit down with the boss and discuss it. There was nothing really. And I had an accident in August, and working in schools, with the schools going back in September, I had a summer school booked 2 weeks after my accident, 2 or 3 weeks after that, which was just me running it. And it was something we'd booked ourselves, which paid quite well. So I didn't really want to turn that down. And then 2 weeks after that, I was back to all the freelance bookings which I was given. And I had 5 bookings in the first week from Monday to Friday. And they were all over the country. And there wasn't even any other presenters that could cover them for me. So if I cancelled them, then the company would have had to have also cancelled them as well. So it left a difficult choice for me to make of what do I do? And I chose to do the booking for ourselves because it was local and I knew I could do it. And I had a friend that I've explained to who was organising it from the school's point of view, and he was really understanding and helped me out. And then I also explained what happened to the company I was freelancing with, and they were, oh my goodness, what do you want us to do? So they were quite understanding, but also they were in a position, I was in a position, so I ended up doing it, didn't I?
Yeah, and it was, really, like you say, it was very, very early days. So things like the real sort of fatigue and different things like that hadn't really emerged, and the low moods and the low energy, because it was really, really early on in our journey. Probably looking back, which is always a wonderful thing, he shouldn't have done it, because I think he returned too early. He thought he could do it. He thought he could do a lot of things. The family, we were urging him not to, but he was quite insistent that he felt that he could do it. So we had to give him that level of trust and belief and allow him to make those decisions. but possibly looking back, I don't think it did him any favours. But
no, not at all.
You go.
But that was a while ago.
So what was it like for you, Tim, in the early days?
Well, fortunately, I wasn't working at the time of my brain injury, but I was actually enrolled in college training to be a counsellor, because for a year before my dad died, and I had some bereavement counselling, and it made me feel worse. And I thought I can do a better job than this person. So I sort of really wanted to do that. Having a brain injury, I tried to carry on going to college and learning all of this immense stuff going on. And my wife said, I don't think it's working. I think you're pushing yourself. And I was like, no, I can do it. I want to get this qualification. I want to get back to work. I want to make something in my life. And in the end, I just had to admit defeat and unfortunately quit, which then made my mental health spiral out of control and low moods and things like that. But then after a few years, I really got a passion about brain injury. So I thought, right, if I can't work, I'll see about doing some voluntary work in the brain injury realm, world, whatever you want to say, which I started doing. And then I started doing lots of training, got to be a peer support worker, started doing peer support work groups with my local headway, and just kept doing loads of training. When I felt up to it, I would do training to sort of make something of what I was doing and make sort of some sense of what was going on, really.
I guess that quite helped then, because it was finding work within the area that's very obviously personal to yourself and what you were going through. So not only were you able to go and do that, but you were also getting something back from it.
I always said I got just as much back than I was sort of giving, if not more getting back, actually, because it gave me more of an understanding of brain injury as a whole, because I've got my experience, but when you sort of with other people, you understand how different a brain injury can be.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like a broken bone, 6 weeks in plaster, a few months of physio and you're back fighting fit. It's totally different. So yeah, it helped me get a good understanding.
Yeah, and that's really true, because I remember when I worked full time, I broke my wrist, and I was in a cast originally, which was fine, but then I had to have an operation about 2 years later to reconstruct the ligament on it, and I got signed off for a month. It was really bizarre. I couldn't believe, was it a month? I can't remember now. It was about three or 4 weeks, and I remember going to my boss and saying, I've just been signed off sick, and I don't know why, because I can still work, but he said, well, you can't. The only way you can do that is go back and reverse the decision.
Yeah.
And they obviously had to be really understanding about it. And I think I did actually reverse the decision after a couple of weeks and went back to work. But as you say, after my arm came out of cast, nobody really thought about it. The odd person say, well, how's your scar doing on your hand? And that's it. You forget about it, don't you? You just carry on with it.
I think that's the big difference with going back to work after a brain injury, particularly if you're suffering with the hidden disabilities, is you have nothing really to almost show and explain to your previous employer, you know, and then it becomes quite a difficult, or can be a difficult sort of scenario of trying to explain how you're feeling, what the brain injury has left you with, and how you can come to some form of, I don't know, not agreement, but how they can help you come back into work, the workplace. But I think the biggest problem that we have is that a lot of employers don't have the knowledge of how to support somebody with a brain injury coming back to work. I mean, I know there's OTs and there's lots of people there to help us, but I just don't think there's enough out there to help people if they want to go back to work, get into it.
Yeah, and also it's difficult as well for the employer because Jules and I run our business together, so there's the two of us, and we have people that freelance almost for us. So, for example, this week, lovely lady who does our social media has been off sick since Monday, and she's not back at work, and she's desperately trying to sort something out for us today from home, but it's impacting our social media going out and some work behind the scenes because there's one person off sick. Now, obviously, if you work full time for us and God forbid had a brain injury and we're employing somebody in that, how would we deal with that? Because we can't suddenly remodel the whole of our business with 3 people. So it's really hard for an employer just to suddenly say, oh, right, okay, well, I'm going to completely change your job role now to suit you. And if they don't get any sort of financial support with it either, then that's where things can end up going a little bit wrong. And that's something that happened with me in the days of freelancing. And I wrote down 3 things here that have massively, massively affected me in the early days. Probably we're talking after a year or so down the line, I was finding it really hard when I was going into a school to actually engage in a conversation with people. So I was there, I was able to present on stage, but then when it came to the bit at the start or the bit at the end, I was just thinking, I just don't want to have a conversation. And people were noticing that. And then obviously the service sort of dropped and the experience dropped. And I was also struggling with driving and making lots of mistakes. So it became really, really difficult for the people I was freelancing with in that situation to adjust my job. Because I still had to go into the school, I still had to be in a noisy environment, I still had to deal with loads of kids, loads of teachers, loads of stuff going on and noise, and I also had to get there and back. So they couldn't just say, well, we'll do everything from your house, because it doesn't work like that. And obviously not having the understanding, I couldn't explain that in the early days anyway. I just didn't even, when I went into a school, I didn't even mention brain injury. I didn't even know what brain injury was at that point. No. I was going through the motions of, this should get better soon and everything, which is another story on another podcast and webinar that we've done in the past, isn't it?
Yeah, so we just looked at ways to try and make it easier in those early days and take the pressure off of you, because sadly, less than 18 months after Mark's brain injury, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was quite aggressive and quite difficult, and I underwent a number of operations and an awful lot of treatment for the following almost 2 years. So being self-employed, we couldn't claim any benefits. We couldn't do anything. We had to find a way around this. So we set about making sure that we only had X amount of hours each week that Mark would be working. We would work out how we would get him there. We had friends that were very, very good and offered to drive him at that point, but we did it a majority via train, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we sort of set our life up that everything was geared to making sure he could get there, deliver the session that the school wanted, and get back. And then I looked after absolutely everything else, like the running of the house and all the rest of it, which was very, very difficult in between all of my hospital appointments and feeling incredibly poorly and all the things that go with what was going on my side of things. But we sort of managed to get a little way through that. However, Mark's company that he was freelancing with noticed the changes. We didn't have a way to explain it to them because nobody had really told us at that point.
No, not at all.
So it was a very, very, very difficult conversation with them. But they basically just, because we were freelancing, said goodbye to Mark. And that was it. We couldn't go back to them with anything or explain anything because we had nothing to sort of support what our situation was.
No. And at the bottom line as well is I did make some mistakes that I wasn't really aware of. I don't know why I made the mistakes at the time. And I didn't understand what the mistakes were because I didn't understand brain injury myself. As Jules said, the company didn't understand it, the school I was working with. So you had almost like a triangulation of misunderstanding somewhere in there. And it was really, really difficult. But I was just going to say, going back to you as well, Tim. So you obviously went on a journey where you ended up going into peer support and where you are now. And a few of our people on here won't know that you just recently started a new job as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And we've been following the journey of that. But I guess the first thing is being in a brain injury environment, people will understand what you're going through. But what have you sort of had to say to them at the start? How have you had to explain to them at the start the hidden disabilities?
Yeah, well, I work for a hospital, well, it's a charity hospital, which specialise in mental health, autism, and brain injury. Luckily enough, so they have got some knowledge of brain injury and the cause, like the symptoms and side effects and that. But in the interview, I did have to stress that I've got a brain injury. I suffer from fatigue. I can't drive far because they've got places in Birmingham, Essex, and Basildon. So I said I wouldn't be able to drive to them places, and just sort of said I was quite honest. I just said everything that I struggle with and have issues with, and they were like, "Oh, that's fine. We understand." Which is why I looked for a job in the brain injury world, because I knew that they'd have some understanding and be a bit more supportive, and I wouldn't feel that, yes, I've started a job, I'm letting them down, I can't do the job and that. But I'm really, really lucky where I am. I've only been there since November. It's part-time to start off with, but I say part-time, I'm doing 20 hours a week most weeks at the moment. Birmingham, I'm doing 12 hours a day on a Monday, every Monday, which is very, very tiring. But they're understanding and let me have 2 days off to recover. So that's another good thing about going somewhere where they've got an understanding. There's things set up automatically for you. And like I said, I've only been there since November, and I got the bit of feedback from the head boss lady, saying about how amazed she is at what I've done and what I do, and she's so pleased that I work for them, and that gave me a boost as well. Just that sort of bit of feedback like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? And I guess being really clear up front is great, because they're not going to say to you, well, actually, do you know what? We want you to start working in Basildon 3 days a week now. And you haven't got to have that conversation with them. And if they do, you can say, well, I did say right at the start, I can't do it.
Yeah. And I guess that's the difference between following a brain injury, whether you're trying to go back to a job that you had pre your brain injury and starting something new. Because I think going back, there's some pros and cons to that, because the job, the people, but their expectations might be higher, thinking, oh, you'll be able to continue as you were previously. But if you'll go to a new place, hopefully, and I am saying hopefully because I know it doesn't always work, you can have them conversations and explain the sort of support that you may need. I know, Kate, you've put on there that you really struggled because of the amount of screen work that you have to do in your job. And I can imagine that is very, very difficult.
I'm having that trouble at the moment as well. A lot of screen time is very tiring. And
how are you coping with that? Are you able to sort of tell them and say, can they alter what you have to do so that you don't have to do that?
They've altered it, so I spread it over the week, and they're going to sort out a computer that I can use from home, because it's a hospital thing. It's got to be very secure network and things like that. But they have said they'll sort me out a computer so I can do stuff at home in between my days at work. So that's one positive as well. plus I get paid while I'm at home as well. So
it's ideal.
Yeah.
Remote working is really good as well, isn't it? I think
It can be if you can.
Yeah, if anything came from 2020, it was remote working became something more normal for a lot of people. Which
But I
is
do
great.
think the screen, because I mean, I do remember when this whole VDU, as they were called, came in. Yeah, do you remember that? They used to be training on, you were supposed to take breaks. But I think that's all stopped, hasn't it? I don't think that's there. And I don't think there's that understanding for people with a brain injury that this whole fatigue, how debilitating it is. I mean, it's something that I have spoken to other people about, and, you know, I'd love to be able to, I don't know, create something to give to employers, but it's, you know, it's so difficult. And it really is about trying to have those conversations. And I suppose maybe if you've got a support worker or a doctor or a GP or somebody that can give you a report or a letter or something to take to your employer saying, this is what's happening, and this person will need to have sufficient breaks or a change in their job role so that they're not on the computer so much.
Yeah.
But I do know that, you know, it's not always that easy, because let's face it, everything now is online, isn't it, as well? Everything. It's all about...
We're online now, aren't we?
It's amazing. If it's not doing this, you're on your phones and all the rest of it. It's so difficult. And Claire, I do remember chatting to you quite a bit and how difficult it's been for you in terms of having to leave your job.
I just noticed as well there, Claire's written that I didn't want to let them down, so I stepped back, so someone else could do the job, and it's so difficult. And also Charlotte said there, just above Claire's comment about being in a really stressful job and it just didn't work out, so now unemployed. And that's really sad, because there's nothing worse than being told you can't do the job anymore or having to leave the job. And I know the day that I got told that the relationship broke down between me and the freelance company, you know, they weren't horrible about it or anything like that. They just said it's not working anymore, and if you feel you can do the job satisfactorily again, come back. But it left me feeling I was totally deflated. I was downbeat. I felt like I'd failed. I felt like I'd let Jules down, and all of these things. I felt angry for quite some time at them as well, because I was thinking, how dare you make these things up? And after a real period of time, I started to understand some of the things that happened, and I guess they didn't know how to deal with it. And then Teresa's also put on there that she returned to work after brain surgery, did a slow gradual return, 4 hours, then 6 hours, then 8 hours, and then up to 40 hours a week. And is it one of those things? I don't think I could work 40 hours a week. I know
you went on medical leave, and you're worried about going back to work. Well, actually, the word that you've used is terrified.
Terrified, yeah.
And I can totally empathise with that. You don't want to go back, but you have no other options.
No, it's so sad to read these stories. Charlotte's also said she had access to work assessment, which
we've had that.
Yeah, I've worked with Dragon software as well. I'll be honest with you, it didn't fully work for me, but it was a really good idea. But access to work has worked for me.
That's helped us quite a little bit. And I don't know if something like that in, I can't say in Wisconsin is available. I don't know. No. But I think one of the things that you're saying, Tim, is because this is your life now, maybe when you're looking to go back to work, you know, go into a situation where they have a better understanding of brain injury. You know, it's certainly something that's worked for you.
It's helped no end. It's took the fear of going back to work and the, you know, the terrified feeling and that sort of pit of your stomach worrying that, you know, I'll start this job and then I'll get told I'm no good at it and get fired, and then it's trying to get back onto benefits or trying to find another job and that. So it has helped me no end and built my confidence up as well, sort of, to do this. And I mean, if you'd told me this time last year that I'd be working in a wonderful hospital doing training, not a peer support worker, I'm an actual peer trainer. I go onto wards and give course training. And that, so I said you were joking there for somebody had said in a year's time you'll be doing this. So yeah, and it's given me a great big boost in my own self-confidence and my abilities.
Yeah, that's really lovely to hear, isn't it? And I think I'd echo that. Since we've started the Brain or Shine project up, there's certainly been something that I've found has boosted my own confidence by hearing really lovely comments from people, and also from the work that Jules and I have done at Future Toolbox. It does feel like it gets you back on track again, which is lovely. Just seen a few more, just realising time a little bit, so we might run a couple of minutes over.
This is such a big subject,
just
though, isn't it?
Just an early morning. We could carry on for ages on this one. But I've noticed that Kerry has said she's working with the rehab team and gearing up going back to work, and they've communicated well with your company. So keep on top of that, Kerry. Teresa said about Dragon software, because typing is really, really sensitive.
Yeah.
And hearing your co-workers typing, I'm so with you on that, because, and again, Tim, me and Tim have talked about that. Background noise is awful, isn't it? So keep pushing forward for that one, because again, as I say, I tried Dragon software and it was really good. And then Claire basically was saying about 3 hours per week. But yeah, access to work's come up a few times. It's definitely worth looking at. And if your employees don't know about it, tell them, because I only found out about access to work by overhearing a conversation at a business networking meeting. And that has literally changed our lives and our business, hasn't it, by getting that support.
And going back to the lady about the background noise, talk to your employer or access to work about getting noise cancelling headphones. Or
Definitely. And Claire's put on there, do we think getting a voluntary job would ease you back that way? And I would definitely suggest that, and I think that is something you did as well, Tim, didn't you?
Yeah. I started volunteering 10 years ago now, and that sort of, it builds your confidence up. Again, because it's voluntary, they're not expecting you to be there 40 hours a week. They're pleased that you show up and things, but it does build your confidence up, your stamina up, and it's sort of a great way of dipping your toe back into work.
Yeah.
And Ava's just popped on here and said, yes, she does voluntary work outside, and it's just popped up, sorry, and something else than a computer, and it's giving you that confidence. So yes, I mean, obviously voluntary work you don't get paid for, but it can help build your self-esteem and confidence. And maybe learn tasks, learn something outside of having to use computers or screens that then you can then take to a job. So it could be a very good way into a change in your direction, your career as such.
I've just read Roman's comment as well, which is sandwiched in between the ones we've just read, and that really breaks my heart to read what you've written, Roman, because you're saying that we've all got stuff going on in your life, but for you, what can you say? 5 years since your accident, you haven't got any progress on getting a job. And again, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because everybody's brain injury is different. One thing I'd like to say, Roman, is if you're not on our Facebook peer-to-peer support group, come onto that and put something on there on the group, because it's very private, and hopefully we can help with some advice. And I think Tim might have some as well.
Roman, it took me 10 years for my brain injury to do voluntary work, and it's been another 10 years before I've been able to get back into a job. So I know 5 years probably seems an age, but in the brain injury, 5 years is quite a slow recovery, really. Don't know if you think about the same, Mark.
Yeah, I think so. It took me, I mean, I didn't have any support for 6 years, and once I started getting support, it took another good few years to start even feeling like I was back on track. But I don't want to sort of say to anybody, it took me so long to get back on track, and that's how long it takes somebody. I know if I'd have got support earlier, I'd have been on track a lot earlier. And I think it's that thing, it's not just about the job, it's about the support, it's about the reaching out to the people that can help you. And whether they're locally, whether it's online or whatever, but also finding out what's going to work for you. And Jules and I have used this phrase quite a lot about trying to live life on our own terms. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all, because loads of people say to us now, it's okay for you because you work for yourselves, and it's okay for you because you might have built some financial stability behind you. But the thing is, we had to do those things, and that wasn't easy. Kate's just said, where was my support from? It was from a local brain injury hospital. And Kate, honestly, I don't know if you probably might have heard my story before, but we had to battle to get that support, because I don't have any physical disabilities. I was turned almost dismissed quite a number of times. But this is really hard, because when you got to battle something, it needs mental energy. It also needs concentration and focus. And then if you get stressed, fatigue kicks in. Yeah. So all I would say, because I'm just conscious of time, I said we may run over 5 minutes, which is worth it for everybody. But all I would say is to try and look at things that cause your triggers. And if your trigger is background noise, as Tim says, look at ways that you can reduce that. It might be some noise cancelling headphones, it might be some software or something. And then if it's in the workplace, go back to the employer and say, I've been talking to somebody in the support group, I think this would really help me, and have that conversation. Look at the things that give you stress. At the time, I didn't realise how much stress I was getting from the freelance job, because of the driving, and because of the fatigue, and because of everything I was doing. And when that actually ended, it took me a while, but I felt more free. And Jules actually saw it as an opportunity to move forward with something that we could do ourselves. So even though it hit us, A, financially, and B, my confidence massively. Yeah.
Your confidence was rock bottom anyway. Yeah. Your anxiety was raging. Roof,
didn't it?
Your mood swings. We were really almost getting to the epicenter of the whole scenario, but not knowing what's causing it, and not being able to have some kind of help of how we manage it. So it was a very, very difficult period.
And Claire's just asked about access for work, voluntary work. I know that charities and voluntary organisations do get funding for things, but I don't know how it works with access to work. So we'll certainly look at that. And also, one more thing to say, or to plug really, is we're really fortunate that a company called Slater and Gordon Solicitors actually sponsor our webinars and helped us fund all the software and the planning behind the scenes that we have to pay out costs for. And it's always worth speaking to somebody like a lawyer, just to find out where you stand.
Well, they have a whole department on employment law for people with brain injuries.
And we're not suggesting that you go and say, I want to take my employer to court, because we always think that, don't we? We think if you go to a solicitor, there's a legal case involved. But what we've actually found with Slater and Gordon, they will be joining us on a webinar very soon to talk a little bit more about work, but also think about the advice that you can get. And a legal expert will give you advice, and generally a lot of these companies will do it for free as well. So if you want advice on where you stand, then that's a really, really good place to start. And as I say, you don't have to go and say, right, I'm going to take my employer to court. It could be just, I need to change my job. How do I do this? And what are my rights? Yeah. And if you find your rights out, then you can go to your employer and discuss things. And I'd always say discuss, not confront them and say, I know my rights, I need to change this. If you sort of go to them and say, look, I've read about access to work, for example, I've read about disability adjustments in the workplace. Yeah. And if you avoid words like law and legal and stuff like that, or rights, I've read about disability adjustments in the workplace. Is there anything I can talk to you about this to help me to make my job better so I can function better for you? And then you're giving them what's in it for me, what's in it for you as well. They're little things, little tips that I would sort of say to anybody who's going out there. And then the last one is just echoing what Tim said and being honest right from the start. This is what I can do and this is what I can't do, and this is the bit that I'll struggle with. And you sort of have to go from there, don't you?
Yeah. But yes, Slater and Gordon, their team, they will be running a specific webinar on this. So obviously we'll promote it and you'll get to hear all about it. But if you have questions or anything, they'll be there on that webinar if you need something answering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add, Tim?
Thank you for having me, and it's been a good by the chat. It's been quite a thought-provoking topic, hasn't it?
Yeah,
it's a difficult topic, isn't it? It's really, really hard because, well, so many reasons, and yeah, we could be here all night if we wanted to.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I'm just aware of people's concentration, so perhaps we'll do another one on this one, because it is something that's work's a big part of our life, isn't it? Whether we're employed, voluntary, or whatever. So,
well, it's part of our identity, isn't it? It's the first question someone asks, "What job do you do?" You know, it's a big part.
What do you do for a living?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for lovely engagement. Do come on to our Facebook peer-to-peer support group and let's chat a little bit more about this, because we can get a real discussion going about it. We can get a private discussion going. So we'll start one of those. We'll start one of those, definitely.
Yeah.
You can find that through brainorshine.com, and we'll also link on our Facebook group to Slater and Gordon if you need some help from them. Obviously, Jules and I and Tim are all on there, so you can link to us, and we're always there to chat.
Yeah. With Roman, you said you need help finding a job. You know, that's something that we've got experience in or could help point you in the right direction. So reach out to us for sure.
Definitely, get in touch with us. And thanks again, Tim. It's always a pleasure, mate. It's so lovely to see you as always.
And thank you for everybody for taking the time joining in today.
Enjoy the rest of the evening, the morning, or wherever you are in the world.
Bye for now.